What's going on, everyone? This is Tyler Dunn here with Jim Monis for another episode of the Go Long Podcast, brought to you by Hamburg Brewing Company. Jim, they've got the beer flowing like wine over there. Working a little Just Saying myself right now, Volume 1, IPA 7.5. The Citra hits you, very smooth. You can't go wrong with everything there. What have you been drinking these days from Hamburg?
Still Optimonium, still Lakeview, always day drinking if I can. Still always tastes a little bit better when the sun's out, especially if you're sitting outside. Tyler, you're making me jealous right now. I like it.
Well, I'm outside because we've got the 14-day-old inside and the 22-month-old inside. So mom's got a lot on her plate right now. Gina's the rock star of this podcast while dad's on the deck drinking beer, talking about football. So I'm a lucky guy.
When Sean Payton used to tell us New Orleans, when he first started working in Philadelphia with the Eagles, he was like the quality control, I believe, or the quarterback coach. John Gruden, I think, was the OC, but they were together all the time. Gruden and Coach Payton were tight, and they started back in Philly. And Coach Payton was just so excited. And he explained to us that he got the job in Philly out of nowhere. Like it kind of like was a quick transition. I think he was at a college, but he got the call. So they left, they go to Philly. But at the same time that he got his job with Philly, they were having their first child. So of course he's there. He's at the, he said he's at the vet. This is back when they played at the vet nonstop, right? That's what you do as a coach. You're there all day, all night. But he said it started to get to the point where he said sometimes they would get home early. He said he would walk through the door and his wife was tossing their newborn in the air to him. He said her much, but he said she would throw her or him, I forget, but he said she was not happy. I was like, yeah, I could see that.
Was it like a Donovan McNabb at Syracuse option toss, like one of these kind of?
That's how I pictured it too.
Yeah, a couple, rotations.
And she wasn't keeping it. Yeah, she wasn't keeping it.
Hopefully with a better completion percent than McNabb had throughout his career.
All right,
he's a great quarterback, not a high completion percentage guy,
I can't believe you did that. You found a way.
Right out of the chute, Matt Fairburn making his presence known. I like it.
And there's the first clip you got to put on Twitter, Tyler, to all the Eagles fans who probably do agree with Matt.
Hey, I'm a fan of Donovan McNabb. He was a good quarterback, but he loved to push it downfield. He didn't go for the high percentage throw all the time. He was a guy that liked to sling it.
Maybe puking in a Super Bowl here and there too. Sorry, Jim.
Who among us?
I was gone I was out there.
You were gone. Okay, that's right. Well, welcome, Matt Fairburn. Good to see you down there. We were talking a little Bills, talking a little AFC East today, so we figured we bring in the best beat writer that there is covering the team, Matthew Fairburn from The Athletic. How's life, brother?
Oh, it's excellent. People might hear a little screaming newborn action coming from this end as well, so apologies if that seeps through the walls here, but life is good. It's tiring, but it's good.
Matt, do you have, I've been curious to read everybody's, training camp reports. It's, I'm always amazed by how people can make a lot of, we did our pod, Tyler and I talked about Trey Lance last week with the 49ers, and we're pretty sure I went right over to the casino to bet him for MVP. It sounds like the Bills should be in cruise control in this division after what I've been reading. So Zach Wilson's officially a bust from what I'm reading from the Jets. Tua, not hearing good things, very average. And the Patriots don't know who's going to win the job. So, this should be a pretty easy division for the Bills.
Yeah, if you read the tea leaves in August, then that's what they'll tell you. But Mac Jones did just switch from number 50 to number 10. The Patriots are finally giving him some respect. So maybe they're ready to call him a quarterback after all. And they loaded up this year. So the Patriots are still kind of lurking. The Bills have looked good though. It's always hard this time of year to separate fact from fiction and figure out if your eyes are tricking you and what all is going on in training camp. Josh Allen has looked better in this camp than he has in any other camp, which should be expected at this point. It's a different thing for me, covering a Bills training camp with an unquestioned starter at quarterback, an unquestioned franchise quarterback, a guy with the big contract, and he's looking the part. He's got someone around him. It's a great place to be a quarterback. It's a great place to be the franchise guy because Brian Daboll's back. They're, stacking new concepts on top of what they already had, and they throw Emmanuel Sanders into an offense that already had Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Cole Beasley. The running game is what it is. It's, not anything special, but man, does he have a ton of weapons to throw to, and he's willing to try things that a lot of quarterbacks can't even think about doing. So it's an entertaining group to watch.
Matt, I was thinking about their receivers a lot lately, and what they've done with their receiving core is, and throw McKenzie in there as well. Besides Davis, Davis is a little bit bigger, so the bigger guys are never going to be great route runners. Those other guys are all incredible route runners who catch the football. That is such a value to have when you're mixing guys in personnel groupings, because you're going to constantly get mismatches because these guys can get in and out of breaks and get open on their own. And that's a hard thing to do. And I really think the Bills have done a nice job of putting that group together where they're all interchangeable. They are a nightmare. That receiving core is big time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to Ken Dorsey about this the other day. Josh Allen is a quarterback who you hear about guys like Tom Brady and other veteran quarterbacks who it certainly worked out for them, but Tom takes a while with guys because he needs them to be right on their spot, and he needs to trust that they're going to be right on a spot because he's going to hit them. Josh Allen doesn't operate like that. He's okay if you're a couple yards off, or if you need to break off early to get open and play a little backyard football. And he's got guys that like to do that. Stephon Diggs can do it. Like you said, they're quick, and especially when they're allowed to freelance a little bit, they can get open and they can do their thing. Cole Beasley's excellent at reading defenses and being one step ahead, and he's naturally quick, physically quick, but he's probably quicker mentally, staying ahead of the defense. And I like Emmanuel Sanders and what he can do to make this look different, right? That's a challenge when you're Brian Daboll and you're a team that's put up the type of points that the Bills did, finding a way to be a little bit different, a little bit, give teams a different look. I talked to June Jones right after the Bills signed Emmanuel Sanders. He coached him and Cole Beasley at SMU at the same time. And he said, the moneymaker is going to be when those two are in the slot at the same time. And you couldn't put John Brown in the slot. That wasn't really an option. Nice. So now having Sanders who can play on the boundary, do a little bit of what John Brown did, then you can move him inside, throw Davis on the outside, and you have a 4 wide receiver set that I just don't know how you match up against it consistently for 4 quarters. The Bills are going to be able to get theirs in the passing game, provided the offensive line in front of Josh Allen can hold up. That's probably the only question about this passing game.
All right, so with this contract to Josh Allen, Super Bowl's the bar. Beating Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs is the expectation. Like, they can put up 30, 35 points on any team in the regular season, win the division, but it's about Kansas City. It's about the playoffs. I mean, the last time we saw the Bills passing game didn't look that great. I mean, even that Baltimore game, they scored 10 points. So we had Jeff Schwartz on, right, Jim? And he was talking about how the Chiefs blitzed his front side. They gave Josh Allen a lot of trouble in terms of that, in terms of what we might have seen in the playoffs. Anything change? Like, how do you think they're maybe attacking that playoff moment right now in training camp? Because you have one of those coveted spots to watch practice, Matt. Never let a crisis go to waste. Some NFL teams using COVID as such. So you're seeing this day in and day out as opposed to others. What do you see out there down those lines?
That's right. I've got exclusive access that some of those on this show here have not been granted.
It's fun. Hey, you know what? We're gonna write about the Bills. We're gonna talk about the Bills. We ain't going anywhere. So, that's what's gonna happen here at Go Long.
Yeah, that Ty Dunn guy, he's bad news. You got to keep him away. You never know what he's going to dig up. The passing game in the playoffs, I think, is an interesting storyline to this team, because the number one element that I want to see what happens, not just with the Bills, but with the rest of the NFL, is how much did having nobody in the stands inflate offensive numbers last year? I think without question, it probably aided offenses in some ways. And that's not just true of the Bills. You know, Aaron Rodgers had a great year. A lot of these quarterbacks that had career years or offenses that had career years, you know, when you don't have any crowd noise and you don't have anybody in the stands, that is a big benefit to the offense. And Josh Allen mentioned that even having the, you know, however many it was in Arrowhead, you know, it was less than half of the stadium. He said, even having that amount of fans, you felt it. And Cole Beasley said, you know, guys weren't ready for that moment. So I'm not saying they're going to fall apart and crash down to earth and be the 2019 offense again because there's a few more screaming fans in the stands, but I do think it's going to have an impact. Josh Allen, even at home, when it's packed and loud, he gets a little overhyped. I don't think he gets nervous. I don't think he's like peeing down his leg, but I think he's jacked up and has trouble reining in his emotions. So maybe last year was enough for him to have the confidence to push through it. And he got the benefit of developing while not having the crowd noise. And now it'll be behind him. But that might be a little bit of when you have crowd noise and you've got teams blitzing, like you mentioned, Tyler, and mixing up the looks that they give you. The whole thing gets a lot more confusing. The whole thing gets a lot more hectic. It's a lot harder to spot things pre-snap and identify what the defense is doing to you. So I think that might be the biggest challenge facing this offense throughout the year. And certainly if they have to go on the road and play the Chiefs in the playoffs again.
I mean, you know, obviously he's worth the money. You had to meet the market. He was second in the MVP voting, all of that. I'm not arguing that, but that's going to be the question mark now. Like, how does he handle the pressure of a playoff moment, 3rd and 8, AFC championship game, deep into the 4th quarter? Like, some quarterbacks, that their heart rate, you know, it's going to spike out of control in that moment. I don't think Kirk Cousins' Monday Night Football record is, you know, coincidental. Like, you talk to people who know Kirk Cousins, they say he gets a little overhyped. Like, in that kind of moment, it's human nature that you're going to have quarterbacks who are overhyped in that moment. You're going to have quarterbacks who aren't. Like, I mean, Tom Brady's down 28-3. And I mean, he's in that moment again and again and again. He's calm as can be. I don't know. I just keep coming back to, we might have even talked about this on a podcast, Jim, but like, I listen to Adam Carolla all the time. He has a lot of these UFC fighters on, you know, and boxers on. And here's like the most violent, aggressive sport. You know, they're trained to like whoop people's asses. And you would think that they're like, you know, in the locker room or in the dressing room, like listening to heavy metal before they go out there. But they're like the most chill, calm people you'll ever hear. Like when they come on for these interviews with Adam, like they're like the most down to earth, like centered, like their personalities aren't what you would expect at all. I don't even know if it relates to what we're talking about, but I think as a quarterback, you do kind of have to have that calm in that moment. And that moment is what they're paying Josh Allen now to win at. Like he's got to meet that moment. He's got to get past it. And we don't know that yet. We're going to find out.
Yeah, I don't know. I look at these contracts and I think I don't go through a checklist and say Josh Allen has to win X number of MVPs and throw X number of touchdowns and win X number of Super Bowls to justify it. I look at it simply as if Josh Allen does what he did last season or something close to it, and they're in the mix in that AFC championship game year after year, or in the playoffs, making a push, putting themselves in the conversation, that's what you're paying him for. The thing about the NFL is it is so hard to win a Super Bowl. Even Patrick Mahomes, you know, he wins a Super Bowl and people are checking off, you know, how many is he going to win? You know, 5, 6, 7. It is so hard to do what Tom Brady has done. You know, Look at Aaron Rodgers in the Packers, right? Would anybody say Aaron Rodgers hasn't earned his money because he's only won one? You know, so a lot of circumstances have to break your way, but it's going to get a lot harder for Bills when those $40 million cap hits kick in. So he's got a couple of years where they'll have the money to surround him with the talent and to really maximize their spending window. Not to say that's their championship window, because I think when you pay a quarterback like this, that is your championship window, right? That should be the idea, at least, that you're in the conversation, you're in the mix. But in a couple of years, he's going to have to be the quarterback who elevates some guys around him who aren't as high paid, who aren't veterans, who are, rookies and guys thrown in. He's going to have to deal with a little bit of what Aaron Rodgers has dealt with in Green Bay, with maybe an imperfect supporting cast that he's not perfectly pleased with. These weapons we talk about, right? The Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders, Gabe Davis, 3 of those guys weren't drafted by this team, and they're on, pretty big contracts. So eventually he's going to have to be the guy that elevates everybody around him. And I think the way he played last year, he plays like that more often than not. Nobody's perfect. Nobody does it year in, year out with the huge numbers. But if he's approaching that and winning playoff games and knocking on the door, the hope would be one of these years it'll break through and it'll work out and he gets a Super Bowl. But the idea, and this is how everybody works when these contracts come out, or like I said, Patrick Mahomes win a Super Bowl. It's like, well, how many is he going to win? Can he win 3? Can he win 4? Same as every time a guy wins a golf major. It's like, well, how many is he going to win? How many is Colin Morikawa going to get? How many is this guy going to get? And
still waiting for Roy. I thought Roy McIlroy was supposed to beat Tiger Woods' record by now. I don't even know if he's won another.
And it's hard. That's the same thing. It's like, it's hard to win golf tournaments. It's hard to win majors. It's hard to win Super Bowls. So he should be one of those quarterbacks that has you in the conversation at the beginning of every season. And if he's not, now that's the flip side of this conversation, right? Talking to Brandon Beane after they signed the deal, and he was mentioning just in passing about structuring the deal. And he said, the cap went back to what it was when Carson Wentz and Jared Goff signed their deals a couple of years ago. And I'm walking away from the conversation thinking, man, and this isn't anything on Brandon Beane. It was just those names got mentioned. And I thought, they're already not on those teams that signed them to those deals. So it can happen fast. Those guys signed right before Patrick Mahomes. That's 2 years, difference between when they signed and when Josh Allen signed. So it happens really fast if it doesn't go well. But when it does, you end up in a situation like the Chiefs where regardless of what you have around the guy, you're confident you're going to be in the mix.
And it's, there is that, I'm just thinking back to Derek Carr's the MVP front runner, 2016, Carson Wentz, 2017. They were dominant. They seemed unstoppable. Jim, you remember that Oakland Buffalo game? Well, it was like, that was Derek Carr every game that season. Like, there was just this belief that he injected his teammates with deep into the fourth quarter. He was going to make a play to turn the tide. And they had a bad defense too. And then the magic kind of went poof, it kind of disappears. They probably regretted those contracts. I feel like Josh Allen is such a hard worker, like that he's not going to regress. Like he'll be his own guy. He's going to, there's a reason he was like lightly recruited and he goes to Wyoming. He improves his he'll bust ass, like even with this deal, but it does make you wonder. Like we have seen quarterbacks have the seasons that he's had, and then they weren't the same.
I think what Matt said is a great point too, Tyler, as far as the Bills know they are confident enough. We drafted him. We've seen he's everything we want. We have a 5-year window right now. That's how I look at it. I look at these windows. We all know it opened, and honestly, it's going to be a 5-year. They got 5 years to make it to the Super Bowl, and they know every year with Josh Allen they have a chance, and they've already proven that. So, you got to that's the goal now. And to your point, Matt, now expectations are, how does Josh handle the expectations? He never had to play under expectations before, really. Wyoming, he didn't have to. Coming out of high school, he never did. Think about some of these guys like Matt Stafford. Stafford was, in Texas, was expected to win a school championship in Texas. He's expected to go to Georgia and win a national championship at Georgia. Stafford only, that's all he knows. Where Allen, this is going to be new for him this year. And how do the Bills fans react at home if Josh has a 3-interception game? Do they keep it together? It's going to be interesting.
Bills fans love their guy.
That's
one thing. I've not seen a love affair with a fan base and a quarterback quite like this one. It is, and it's in the early stages, right? It's still the honeymoon
We're in the
stage
honeymoon
a little
phase,
bit. But I think I think that's part of what they love about this guy being that face of the program is I don't envision him changing much. To Tyler's point, he loves the process of getting better at quarterback. He's a nerd about it. He works a lot. He still has this inferiority complex because of where he came from and constantly feeling like he needs to prove himself, which I always, find borderline unhealthy in some ways. You need it to play quarterback, but I think about Tom Brady and I think he doesn't seem very well adjusted. Like I think most normal human beings would have hung it up by now and stopped driving themselves so crazy to get the next one. But Josh Allen has a little bit of that to him. He's constantly trying to improve. He's constantly trying to be, what people say he isn't. And I find it interesting that Brandon Beane said he pretty much planned for this contract from the moment he picked Josh Allen, which I guess you have to, because otherwise you're going to be screwed if he ends up, and you don't pick him up at that spot and trade what you trade for him if you don't think you're going to be paying him this kind of money. But to plan for it in the face of everything that people said when he picked him, in the face of everything that was said about him as a rookie, to just sit there and say, yeah, we're going to end up paying this guy a lot of money and he's going to be worth it, is to have that conviction and to have the plan and have it all, come full circle to where even the salary cap drops and you still have the money to make it work. It's a credit to the planning that they did in that front office from a salary cap standpoint. And it's crazy to think that this contract is so rich. It's the richest in Buffalo history. The next one was Marcel Darius. That's the record it broke. That's a long gap between a contract of this magnitude and the pressure that comes with it. And people celebrate them in the moment, right? People celebrated the Jack Eichel contract in the moment. People celebrate these contracts, even though the money's not going in their bank account. And it comes with a whole different set of expectations and different conversations because it's an albatross on your cap. If what he was last year, it's not worth it.
Matt, I gotta hit pause on that real quick. Like Marcel Darius just brought back some memories. Sorry, Jim.
This is good. I like this. I didn't know that. No, go ahead. I was going to say, is Mario Williams the next biggest contract after Marcel? Because your team's biggest contract should be, if you're doing things right, it better be your quarterback. That's what you do. That's what you do when you're struggling. You overpay Mario Williams. You overpay Marcel because you don't want to lose any good players that you have. But at the end of the day, you're not really doing anything until you get the quarterback right. Doesn't matter how good those guys are.
I mean, Darius was unbelievable in 2014. Like game wrecker.
Tackle. Yeah, he didn't. He just his talent's off the charts. Everything else is what prevented him from being a superstar.
But take us behind the scenes though on that real quick, Jim, because I remember we were out there. I think you were there too, Matt, in Detroit last preseason game. I remember talking to Darius in the locker room, and that's when he said the infamous, they're treating me like I'm a dime a dozen around here. He was pretty pissed off, Jim. You had a snot-nosed shit reporter like myself kind of like egging him on, what's the deal with this contract situation? And he puts that out there. What happens behind the scenes when he kind of puts the pressure directly on you, Doug, Terry, pay me, and the regular season's a week away? Holy crap. What's it like to be in your shoes?
It was tough because it had nothing to do with his talent. So to sit there and everybody's like, of course he is deserving of this money based on his talent and production, but the whole team knows, players, the coaches, everybody knows you're going to pay this guy. You don't know if he's showing up every day on time for practice, in shape, out of shape. Those are a lot of big question marks that you're getting ready to pay somebody that kind of money. But at the time, to lose a guy like that when our defense was kind of what we felt so good about because we didn't have the franchise quarterback. So we were kind of, hey, if we have an average quarterback, our defense better be top 5 like it was. We can't lose guys like Marcel. We can't, we got to keep him somehow, some way. And, guys don't change. Guys don't change. He had headaches at Alabama. He had headaches here, and all off the field. And Marcel comes from, it's not all Marcel's fault, as we know. Oh, my
God, yeah.
Know his background, right? So it's not all his fault, but it's just what it is. They don't change. And, yeah, it's hard. If you don't – you want to pay your quarterback this money. That's what you want to do. A D tackle, I hate to say it. Aaron Donald, we all know he's whatever, unstoppable. I mean, honestly, it's all about Stafford for that team. Like, we sit there and talk about Aaron Donald as this great player. Well, they're not going to do anything unless Stafford takes him, so.
Man, and we'll get back to the
more.
Oh, sorry, Matt, go ahead.
You get a little more liberal with the money on other spots when you're not sitting there like Brandon Beane picks Josh Allen and says, I am planning to extend this guy in 2021. Like I need to plan for that. And I can't, mess around with other stuff. And like you said, when you don't have that, you realize you need to be good in a lot of other places, but you're also sitting there saying, well, we're not paying EJ Manuel anytime soon. And that would mean that, you're not worried about the quarterback contract because it's not there yet. The quarterback isn't there. You're kind of, when you're playing that patchwork game at quarterback, you kind of have a little bit more to move around and to throw at guys. And it puts more of a spotlight on it too, right? If you lose Marcel Darius when you don't have a quarterback, people say, what are you doing? Well, how could you lose Marcel Darius, this great guy that you picked? If the Bills lose, and they didn't, they were able to get Deion Dawkins, Trey White, Matt Milano all back. But if they lose Matt Milano because it means signing the quarterback, people are all right with it. If they have to lose Ed Oliver in a couple of years, or if one of those things happens where it slides through the cracks and a contract situation doesn't work out, they got the important piece. It's magnified tenfold when you don't have that. And you're like, man, we hit on this guy that we picked in the top, 5. He's a damn good defensive tackle. He's wrecking games. It's a roll of the dice, right? Because of what he is off the field. It's like people are going to see this and it's going to hurt our defense.
Tyler, we talked about that during free agency with Milano. I kept saying, I said, I know we all love Milano. Shit, we drafted him. I was a big fan of him. Happy to see his success. But I said, they don't have to overpay him. Like, if you lose Milano, it's going to be okay. You have the quarterback in place. You can replace Milano. You don't want to. I mean, if you can keep him, great, and they did. But you don't stress about those guys like you used to.
Yeah. And that's such a great point by Matt. And it's like, yeah, I mean, if you don't really know what you have going on at quarterback, I mean, it's kind of similar to what New England's doing. I mean, they're paying up for all these other players and just hoping that Cam Newton and Mac Jones figure it out. I don't think that's a recipe for success, but if you're kind of like stuck in that position, it's not a bad option. I mean, you'd rather do something. And to defend like you and Doug Whaley, it's like, if Rex Ryan doesn't do what he did schematically with the defense, that was a really good defense. Like if
it did take, you're right. That took a turn for Marcel. That defense, it was a mess. That was a mess to get Marcel's talent to match what Rex wanted to do. I
remember him dropping into coverage. Was it against Kansas City? You got Marcel Darius dropping into a hook zone. I mean, like BJ Raji in the NFC Championship game, waiting for Caleb.
We used to sit. We're sitting. Whaley and I are sitting with Terry. For all the games. Like I've told a lot of these stories, but there would be third downs. The best Marcel did. Marcel wasn't really great against the run. He was actually, for a big man, he always would just try to jump around guys because he was so agile for that size. He ran a 4.85 at 330 some pounds. Like, you don't find guys like that. He would come running out on third downs, and Terry, Doug, and I would just don't know what to tell you. And Marcel's like, what's going on? After the games, why are they taking me out there? We don't have any answers for you. Like, it was a mess.
And Terry really took him under his wing, like off the field. He loved Marcel Darius. I mean, here's a dude that everybody in his life is dying. He doesn't really have anybody. It seemed like the owner of the team really tried to
I've
take
told
him under.
this, Terry and Kim, the stuff they do for these players, I don't know how many owners do. And what they even tried to do with Chantrell Henderson was incredible too. Terry and Kim have big hearts. They have big hearts and pockets.
Yeah, well,
I
story
saw
for another day
Terry's new
there.
Forbes. Terry went up to 5.4 billion after that. When he bought the team, I think he was at 4 billion. So that's turning out pretty well.
Matt,
Sound a little investment.
Good investment.
Those NFL teams. We got to cobble some funds together here on
For the three of us, can the three of us get together and can we make a run?
And all right, before we like whip around the division, you know, what else could this season come down to, Matt? Like, we've talked so much about Josh Allen, but is there a player, a position, something going on with this team that you can see the season tipping one way or another off of?
I think a couple of things. Two spots to me are potential. I mean, you look for any hole on a team like this, right? Because everything, as Jim mentioned at the top, you read the training camp reports, it's like all smooth sailing, right? Hand them the division now. Let's just fast forward to the AFC title game and see if they can beat the Chiefs. So you kind of look and you say, all right, this can't all be perfect, right? There's something here. The offensive line is interesting to me because Deion Dawkins missed a couple of weeks with COVID. He just got activated off the COVID list today. This is Thursday, August 12th. We're recording this. But he hasn't stepped on the practice field. To me, a man that large having COVID, I'll be interested to see what kind of shape he's in, if he's lost any weight, what it's going to take to get him ready for the season. We know that COVID can have some lingering effects. Let's hope that's not the case for this guy. Because he's as important to that offensive line as anybody. And he is a legit franchise left tackle, and they do not have something close right now behind him. Spencer Brown, the rookie, tons of talent, huge dude, super raw. He's looked it early on, filling in for Dawkins. Bobby Hart is another guy that's gotten thrown in. I don't know. Don't think he belongs on this team. Tommy Doyle, the 5th rounder, probably more of a right tackle. He's even more raw than Spencer Brown is. So you've got Darrell Williams, you've got Deion Dawkins, 2 solid tackles. If anything happens to either one, I really don't know what you do. And then you're dealing with, the guys protecting your franchise quarterback. They've got a 3-way guard competition going on between Cody Ford, John Feliciano, and Ike Butker. Not exactly the best situation there to me. I mean, 3 decent options, but not, 2 great ones. John Feliciano lost about 20 pounds.
Wow.
And his game is power. So he looks a little quicker, but his game is power. That's a strength of his. So I don't know if he'll maintain that. Cody Ford has had a weird start to his career, so he's a bit of an unknown. And Ike Butker also spent some time on the COVID list and has kind of been kicking the rust off. So I think offensive line, that spot kind of failed them in the AFC Championship game, and they brought the band back, which is fine because it wasn't a bad group, but it wasn't their strength in the title game. So that's one. And then 2 is cornerback. You could basically sing the same song. You've got Levi Wallace, who's pretty solid as a number 2. The idea going into camp was that he'd be competing with Dane Jackson. Dane Jackson just hasn't been able to stack up to Levi Wallace. But after those 2, you've Cam Lewis, undrafted, Rashad Wildgoose, 6th round pick, rookie, and then 2 undrafted guys in Elijah Griffin and Nick McLeod. Basically, Saran Neal can play a little bit on the boundary too. A guy that's kicked around and played inside out, pretty good player. But the depth in the secondary, at corner in particular, safety is pretty much fine. But at corner and at offensive tackle, there are some depth questions, which, I mean, good questions to have, right? Not starting lineup questions, but depth questions. If you get an injury, how do they survive that?
Who starts in their nickel package at corner? So who do they bump inside?
Well, typically Taron Johnson is the guy,
Okay.
and they do use Saran Neal there at times. Saran Neal is a guy that can match up on tight ends a bit better than a guy like Taron Johnson, who's a little bit more undersized. But as far as their pure nickel guy, it's Taron Johnson. Everybody remembers him from the play in the
Yeah.
Ravens game.
I remember,
But
I remember some other plays.
but he's up and down.
I agree.
He hurt a lot too. You know, he's often hurt. And so then you've got Saran Neal as a backup. Wild Goose can play the slot. Cam Lewis can play the slot a little bit, but they're really, and last year there was a game where they had, you know, COVID hit the cornerback room and wipe a few guys out for a game, and it was trouble in Arizona. So you'd love, look, when you have a team with as many superstars and some high profile, high paid players as you have, your depth isn't going to be perfect. So again, we're poking holes in a very good team here, but those are the two spots I wonder about, because they're really two spots that cause some problems in the title game. You know, Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill had a field day, and that Chiefs pass rush, you know, John Feliciano was throwing punches at the end of the AFC Championship game. He might have wanted to put up a fight, you know, between the whistles. Probably would have served the team a little bit better. So to me, that unit's got a lot to kind of answer for with how things ended. They've got two great players on their offensive line: Deion Dawkins, Mitch Morse. Darrell Williams, I think, is a very good player if he plays like he did a year ago on a 1-year prove-it deal. He's got the money now, so we'll see. But the guards, they've got some questions to answer there, and they've got some things to figure out. And if they're going to, you know, protect this franchise investment to the tune of $258 million that they've got under center.
I mean,
Matt, how do you, for me going into this season, the one thing I'm paying attention to early, especially even that first game against Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh's offensive line's revamped and not good. I would think the Bills want to see a dominant performance out of this defensive line at some point, because they've shown faith to keep, you know, obviously Jerry's getting older, but I mean, he just plays. He's always in shape. No, the motor never stops. But are these young guys, are they ready to, like, is Oliver going to step up? Are these first round, you know, the Wake Forest defensive end, the Miami defensive end, and then you have the Espenza, I would say his name wrong, but they have so many young guys they've invested in. Are they going to get that return now on the investment with their pass rush?
Yeah, they had more money tied up in the defensive line than any team in the NFL last season. And,
wow, what a stat there.
And that did not show itself on the field.
That's a great stat.
They've got now that's money, and then
I forgot about Star. Yeah,
it doesn't really even count Ed Oliver and AJ Epinesa.
Right.
Like their two highest draft
nothing.
picks from 19 and 20. So they had a lot invested. And then what did they do? They went and drafted one in the first and second round.
That's why I'm asking.
They signed F.A. Obata too. It's looked a lot better.
Okay.
Now, again, Deion Dawkins hasn't been out there. Ike Butker wasn't there. Feliciano missed some practices. So there's been moving pieces on the offensive line. You never know how much of it is, you know, how great does this defensive line look, or is the offensive line figuring things out? But Rousseau looks better than I expected this early. Like, he didn't play football last year. Everybody thought he was this raw prospect. He looks good. Boogie Basham has struggled to crack into the top couple of units. But, you know, at the scrimmage last week, the open scrimmage, he was with the threes at times. So, but hey, it's a deep group, you know. You mentioned Hughes, Addison, Epinesa, F.A. Obata has been like the star of camp. The guy's in the backfield all the time. He can play inside out. Star is back in the middle. They hope that frees things up for Ed Oliver. So that is a question. You know, the pass rush couldn't get to Mahomes. Maybe that caused some of the problems in the title game. But I give them credit for not necessarily sitting still just because they'd thrown some money at it. They kept going, and they weren't afraid to go. A lot of people talk about best player available, but Brandon Beane actually did it in the second round because he's like, we didn't think we were going to take two DNs, but Basham was sitting there. So we kind of felt like we had to. He was sticking out on our board, and you know, the best player available thing actually came true. So yeah, they better hope. To me, I've said this on, forget who I was saying it to, but a lot of pressure on Eric Washington, the defensive line coach, to get something out of these guys. And Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott, the guys scheming defense, to get that return on investment that you talk about, because it is a significant investment. And they might keep, I don't know, 9, 10 of these guys. I mean, they have a deep defensive line, and it's going to be hard to cut some of them. You know, we're still, Vernon Butler is another one that we didn't mention. They paid good money to. Like, there's a lot of money tied up in this defensive line, a lot of draft picks, and that's where the game is won sometimes. So they better hope they get some good play out of them, and they look pretty good so far.
Yeah, I mean, if we're nitpicking, it's like what held them back in that AFC Championship game. They couldn't get after Patrick Mahomes, and their line was And what has really changed since then? I mean, they didn't pay up for a Bud Dupree, a Unique Ngakoue, a Matt Judon. I mean, there were a lot of pass rushers they could have thrown money at the expense of a Matt Milano. But you're right. They just bring on all these draft picks. Obata. We'll see what happens. I think and I'd love your take on this, Matt. Like, aren't the Bills kind of entering this next phase as an organization where you pay the quarterback, you better start nailing on these draft picks. You better start nailing on some of these free agents you're getting in that second and third tier, because you can't just throw money around at the Mario Addisons of the world and overpay. They've been overpaying because they've been able to. Now you can't. I mean, that's why we had that story on Damar Hamlin. Here's a 6th round pick at a safety position where they've got 2 safeties, but at some point, Hyde and Poyer, they're not going to be there forever. You need somebody like that to step up. And that's where the Bills, we're going to find out if this is just like this short window of opportunity that's going to pass because they can't do much around Josh Allen because they can't draft well, or they can draft really well and they can reset the roster. A lot like Seattle after they paid Russell Wilson, they're competing every year because they draft so well. We're going to find out a lot, and that's when the pressure is kind of on people in the front office, right?
Yeah, I think about it too. You know, a lot of people think, man, they got to hit on Rousseau and bash him. And that's true. You'd hope that they hit on Rousseau and bash him. But I think about it like, if the 21 Bills are going to have, success, look a couple years in the rearview mirror at who they picked. You want the development to be happening, right? You want Ed Oliver, your top 10 pick, to play like a top 10 pick. If Greg Rousseau doesn't provide you instant impact, that's not an indictment on him as a player yet, right? You give him a year or two to turn that corner. It's a Saran Neal, a Taron Johnson, an Ed Oliver, an AJ Epinesa, guys that you picked, finding a gem somewhere, getting, especially on that rookie deal. Heck, you could even say Tremaine Edmonds, throw him in while he's still mildly affordable. Having the development happen and not simply throwing money at your problems, which is not a criticism of the Bills because they had the money to do it. They planned appropriately, and their entire offensive line they threw money at. They drafted Deion Dawkins. They drafted Cody Ford. They don't know what they have yet, but that's another one, right? We talk about the questions on the offensive line. If Cody Ford is what you want in the second round, you shouldn't have a problem plugging him in and getting good guard play out of him. Same goes at cornerback. If Taron Johnson keeps playing the way he did in the playoffs, Levi Wallace was undrafted. They're kind of, and Jim can speak to this, Sean's days as a defensive backs guy, he thinks he can get out of, every undrafted, every 6th round guy. So really Tre'Davious White is the highest investment they've made at corner. They haven't gone that high lately, but it's a good point, Tyler, because they're in a couple years where they can still spend, somewhat freely here. But after that, you better hope that the draft picks are developing and giving you some cheap, good, productive years. So because you can't afford Mario Addison, Mitch Morse, and Cole Beasley, and Stephon Diggs, and Emmanuel Sanders all at once. You have to pick your spots with that a lot more carefully and hope that you have, to your Seattle point, a Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf come along to give you the boost, the cheap boost, in other spots.
Well said. I hear a crying baby on your end. I'm sure there's a crying baby in
good
in my
ambient
home
noise.
Here. Yeah, it is. But we got to whip around the division here quick before we sign off. Anybody scared Buffalo here? I mean, is it a landslide, AFC East divisional champs again, or can you make the case for somebody else in this division?
New England would be the one team. Bill Belichick's always got a plan. He's no dummy. He's no slouch, and he's making do with what he can right now. Right, to your point earlier, Tyler, it's not exactly the model. Throw all this money around in free agency and get by with a Cam Newton, Mac Jones quarterback competition. But he's got a plan with the two tight ends, with the defensive line that he built. I would think that game at the end of the year when the Bills put a whooping on the Patriots and Josh Allen lit them up, stuck with Bill Belichick because he he's seen that guy a lot. He's given Josh Allen fits, but Josh Allen got him. And he now has a defense and players that could give the Bills some problems. Can they put it together for a whole season against everybody else enough to beat the Bills? I'm not totally sure. The Jets, I think, are a couple years away at best. Zach Wilson, he may end up being a great quarterback, but it's going to be, it should be a similar trajectory to what the Bills had with Josh Allen. They should expect some bumps in the road early on, and they're going to have to be a little bit patient. The Dolphins should, based on their rebuilding path, this should be a competitive team, a team that can push the Bills, but there's something about them. The Bills have owned them. The Bills ran backups out against them at the end of last year and kicked their ass. So Josh Allen has crushed that team. Even when the Dolphins have good defenses, Josh Allen has lit them up. To me, they shouldn't scare the Bills unless Tua takes a real sharp turn and becomes a big time quarterback. To me, the Patriots are the only strikes the fear, and it's probably some PTSD for Bills fans, right? They're used to Bill Belichick striking the fear of God in them, and he's earned that respect. So, but I think the Bills are betting favorites for a reason. It's hard to see one of these other teams putting it together against them.
Jim?
Yeah, I'm with Matt on that. The one thing about the Patriots that I always want to write them off because he's not Cam, and Mac Jones is average to me. But they won 7 games last year, and that was a horrible roster. So to Matt's point, you got to factor the Patriots in. I agree. Don't think for a second. I agree, Matt. They've spent this whole offseason. There's no way they're not having a plan to at least compete. I don't know. I don't think they're going to be good enough to win this division, but I agree. I think the Patriots are the team you need to pay attention to, and it just starts at quarterback for them. We'll just watch. Cam is how he looked. They're still not going to beat Buffalo, I don't think. And McDermott does not like Cam Newton. I promise you, he will do whatever it takes to not lose to Cam Newton. But
I was one of his players once upon a time. Cam Newton was a Carolina Panther.
In the Super Bowl. That's why he has a job. That's why he has a head coaching job. It's because of Cam Newton.
Surprising that he wouldn't like Cam Newton that much.
And some other guys that got him the interview. But
we can go there.
The Dolphins. I'm with Matt a little bit on Miami. I'm not a Tua guy, but I don't want to write him off yet. But until we see Tua take that step or Zach Wilson take that step, I just don't think those teams are going to really compete with Buffalo.
Isn't it crazy? We were just talking about the 49ers.
I'm
sorry.
Give them one. I feel like New England could give them split the series, and Belichick might shut Josh Allen down one game, maybe that prime time game on national TV. Yeah. He'll have a good plan. I like the guys that he signed. I just don't know if, Bill Belichick's probably spent a lot of time figuring out what went wrong against Josh Allen and how to beat the team in his division, right? The big dogs in his division, what people did to them for years, trying to build a team to beat them. But the question is, does the offense and does everything else translate into a team that can win 12, 13, 14 games and take a division? I'll believe it when I see it. Newton maybe will be better, right? With a year in the system. His arm didn't look right last year. I don't know if it'll be back, at all.
No.
I don't know. We'll have to dial up our old pal Mike Rodak to get the inside scoop on this Mac Jones guy, but
yes.
I'm not sure. I'm kind of with Jim. He just gave off an air of being somewhat of an average prospect, elevated by those around him at Bama, but I don't know. Bill Belichick's gotten some pretty good performances out of lesser quarterbacks. So we'll see what he's got up his sleeve. It's weird to think like we maybe have seen the last of Bill Belichick being that guy that you need to be super terrified of, but maybe we haven't. Right? He's got one last trick up his sleeve.
I think Mac Jones should talk to Marcel Darius and maybe steal that nickname, Dime a Dozen Mac Jones. I think we've seen Mac Jones before, right? I mean, we've seen him around. It is pretty wild though. I mean, we had John Middlecoff on last week talking NFC West, and the 49ers with Trey Lance, it seems like they were kind of like chasing their next Josh Allen. They got their asses kicked by the Bills on Monday Night Football, and they wanted their own freak of a quarterback to try to do something creatively. And the Patriots, they got their butts kicked on national TV. I think they both were Monday Night Football, right? Yeah,
they were definitely both national TV. I forget if it was Monday. The days bleed together.
They do.
The days run away like wild horses over the hills. You know how it is.
Especially when you have infants, right? They just blend together. But their answer was like, Belichick could have done what San Francisco did. They could have thrown all the first round picks all over the place to try to chase one of these guys, but they instead attacked like Josh Allen on the Bills via free agency, I guess, and spending like crazy. And they're gonna try to rebuild this defense up, stop them. We'll see which way kind of works here, but it's fascinating to see the Bills. A team that missed the playoffs for 2 decades, they're dictating now. Like teams are reacting to Josh Allen and the Bills. It's kind of strange to still wrap your head around.
It's a credit to Dable too. I told you, teams are all studying the Bills' offense hard, like how to slow this offense down. So it's a credit to Dable too.
Yeah. That's a good spot, fellas. Man, Matt, great to have you. Thanks so much for hitting pause on life, on your son, on the Athletic, to bullshit little Bills, little AFC East with us. Great to see you.
Oh, it's great to see you guys. We'll have to get out on that beautiful deck of yours at some point soon.
Whether it's this deck or maybe it's training camp too. Maybe it's Bills practice. I see you next. So that'd be great.
I don't know about that. I somehow I doubt that.
I think we should all meet at Hamburg Brewing.
That's what we got to do. Let's make that happen. I think our wives would all understand, the power of the collective here. If we kind of just tell
bring
our wives
them along.
all in unison,
a little play date.
Let's bring them. Let's just bring all the families. Let's do it. Beautiful. All right. Well, we're brought to you by Hamburg Brewing Company, and that's where we're going next to do this. Let's see you there, fellas. Thanks so much.